Hey, vinyl community, Micah again from Soundmasters, talking all things vinyl as always. Today I'm taking a look at the Fosi Audio Box X2 tube phono preamp. Now this thing costs well under $100. I picked mine up here in the UK for just £60. At the time of publishing this video, I believe in the US it's going for just $70. But can a cheap Chinese tube phono preamp that costs well under $100 really deliver the goods? Does it sound any good? In today's video, we're going to find out. Let's get straight to it. So as with all affordable tube phono preamp designs, the tubes that are featured in the Fosi Audio Box X2 are buffer tubes. They're not in the gain stage, which makes this, essentially a hybrid design between solid state and vacuum tube technology. So it's designed to impart an element of tube characteristics to the phono preamp, but many might argue that it's not a true tube phono preamp. It's just a solid state preamp with a buffer tube stage. So on the back panel, it all looks pretty familiar. Of course, you've got your standard inputs for RCAs, just moving magnet only in this case, but what do you expect for $70? You've got your earth terminal next to it and your audio outputs and your power socket here. The stock 6A2 vacuum tubes that come with it are uninstalled when it first arrives in the box, and you just need to insert those yourself. It's really easy to do there, just push fit. The pins have to be lined up, so you really can't make any silly mistakes there. Very easy to do. On the front panel, it's a little bit different. There's something a little bit curious here. There's an audio input, which is like a little 3.4 millimeter 3.4? Yeah, like a little mini headphone jack, basically, like this. It's 3.5 millimeters, isn't it? And anyway, they ship this cable with it, this kind of, RCA to standard kind of 3.5 millimeter jack cable. So the whole idea is that you could insert an auxiliary device into this phono preamp, and that doesn't go through the kind of phono stage. And I suppose you could use it to add some potential tube colouring to those sources. Now, I personally am never going to use that feature, so I kind of wish it just wasn't there. It clutters up the front panel. I prefer it just wasn't there, and we had a cleaner front panel look and feel overall. I don't know what you think, but would you ever use that? Let me know down in the comments below. You've got your gain switch here, so it's adjustable between 39 and 45 dB for my cartridge and Autofont 2M Blue. I have mine set to 42 dB, which as closely as possible matches the optimum gain requirements for this preamp. Now, interestingly, that is the same, 42 dB is exactly the same as what my built-in phono stage is on the Project Stereo Box DS2 integrated amplifier that you can see behind me in this video as well. Now, with this being a tube in inverted commas phono preamp, one of the fun things you can do is swap out the tubes for something else to see if it improves the sound in a way that you like, or perhaps it just changes it in a way that you prefer. So one of the automatically recommended upgrades if you buy this on Amazon are these Riverstone Audio tested and matched pair of 5654W vacuum tubes. So if you're based in the US and you buy the Fosi Audio Box, so link in the description to the product, by the way, if you choose to buy it, it will automatically kind of recommend that you tack this on as an upgrade. A lot of people have done this and reported better audio quality. I did buy some very similar tubes here in the UK, and I'll get to the kind of differences that I could hear further in this video, but that's just something that's a little bit fun and something that kind of comes with the territory of anything that has tubes, is that you can have that user DIY upgradability because you can change those tubes very easily yourself. Before we move on to how this phono preamp sounds, there is one small niggle I want to mention that I encountered whilst hooking it up. Now, the problem was that the earth wire spade terminals on my cable were not wide enough to go fully round the circumference of the terminal, and this means that I simply had to just screw it down harder to avoid it slipping off. It's not a huge deal breaker, it did make full contact and it works fine, but it is a little bit clumsy and a little bit annoying. So now on to the sound quality. So at such a cheap price, I just really didn't know what to expect from the Fosi Audio preamp, and having recently purchased the Project Tube Box DS2, this little preamp has some pretty high expectations to meet. Undoubtedly, it's unfair to compare a $70 preamp with one that costs nearly $1,000, but I must say I was blown away by just how well this little preamp stood up. Compared with the built-in phono stage on my integrated amplifier, I would describe the sound as much more dynamic and alive, particularly in the low-end frequencies. Spinning Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is a record that I regard as sounding absolutely superb, the bass sounded noticeably more agile and dynamic compared with the built-in Phono Preamp, and, interestingly, more dynamic than the Riga Phono Mini that I also recently tested on this channel. Now, the Riga Phono Mini is more transparent sounding, but those who like a little more action, if you like, in their sound may actually prefer the Fosi Audio Box X2 preamp. When you consider the price difference, that's quite a statement. Now, the soundstage of the Fosi Audio Pre is impressively wide for a budget device. Where I think it lacks a little bit though is on the top end, which I found, perfectly adequate, but it could be improved. Suspecting the stock tubes could be the culprit here, I quickly headed back over to Amazon and purchased the recommended tube upgrades. Though these tubes were clearly marked made in the USA on the actual product, the packaging interestingly reads made in China. So, I'm not overly convinced that these are genuine USA tubes, and given the price, this should not come really as a massive surprise. Origin aside, when I installed them, I did feel they gave a subtle uplift to the top end, and they also had a slightly tamer bass, so overall it's a tad more balanced, arguably. The difference is relatively subtle, but for a small additional cost, it's worth picking them up to see which set of tubes you prefer. So what's the conclusion then? Let's wrap this up. Well, I think for the cost, I'm incredibly impressed. If you're still using your built-in Phono Preamp on your turntable or even your amplifier, then I think picking up this Phono Preamp is an absolute no-brainer at the cost. So, while some built-in Phono Preamps are quite capable, most are simply just good enough to get you started and will leave you wanting from a sound quality perspective. Look at it like this: for less than $100, if you don't have a Phono Preamp or you have a fairly mediocre built-in Phono Preamp, then you can significantly improve the front end of your system or get started with a Phono Preamp that, for a budget Phono Preamp, sounds pretty damn good. It doesn't have quite the musicality of more expensive tube Phono Preamps, but it does sound exceptionally good in this price bracket. There are more transparent sounding preamps on the market, but the sound of the Fosi Audio did have me gripped, and it had me wanting to line up old favourites from my collection just to see how they would translate through this preamp. There are, in my opinion, better looking Phono preamps out there as well, and I think most buyers will simply never use that front panel input, which just adds clutter to the design. Overall, the Fosi Audio Box X2 Phono Preamp is an exceptional compact box that's ideal for vinyl lovers on a budget or as a second Phono Preamp for an additional listening space. And of course, if you don't have a Phono Preamp, then you're going to need one somewhere in your system, so this is a great place, in my opinion, to start. Quite simply, this is one of the best audiophile bargains I've heard in a long time. So that concludes today's review. Thank you ever so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you own this Phono Preamp? What do you think of it? Have you purchased one as a kind of second backup Phono Preamp? Did you buy one just out of pure curiosity? And also, did you try upgrading the tubes? Let me know your experience and your thoughts down in that comment section below. But if you're new to this channel, please do consider subscribing. Would love to have you on board. But until then, keep spinning.